I was a pretty hotshot composer in New York in those days, and I ran into Bob Costello, who was a friend. Bob Costello was about to produce Dark Shadows, and he said, "Hey, Cobert, I've got a new show going on in the area. Interested in doing it?" I said, "Well, I'd like to meet the producer and read the script and talk to him, see what's going on." So I went up to Dan's office, and Dan and Bob were there, and I immediately liked Dan. He's a completely different type from the people that I used, but a spark happened. And we talked about it a little bit, and he gave me the script, and he gave me his ideas, and I went home and read the script, and it smelled hit to me. It really smelled hit. I came back and said, "Okay, I'd like to do it." And he said, "Fine, you're hired." And that was it. That's what the relationship has been. Just absolutely 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And from that point on, he said, "Well, how am I going to hear the music?" And I said, "Well, you're not going to hear the music. You're not going to hear the music until you've already paid for it and it's already been recorded." And he said, "Well, what happens if I don't like it?" And I said, "Well, tough. You're stuck if you don't like it. That's the way these things work." So he said, "Fine, okay, let's proceed on that basis." And he said, "But I'd like to hear the theme." I said, "Well, I don't have a theme yet. I just read the script." And I said, "The way I prefer to work is that I would like to start writing some of the backgrounds and get myself immersed in this spooky scene here, in this dark shadow scene. And at that point, a theme will come to me. And sure enough, is that okay with you, Dan? And then I'll come up and I'll do the theme for you." And he said, "Yeah, that's fine. Anything you want to do." He was very reasonable in those days. He still is, actually. He's a terrific guy to work with. And sure enough, one morning I was shaving there at my apartment in New York, and in came the theme. Ba-da-dee, ba-da-da-dee, da-da. There it was. And I said, "This sounds absolutely right." So I called Dan and I said, "I've got it." And he said, "Well, how am I going to hear it?" And I said, "Well, you want to come to my studio?" And I thought, "No, I don't want my studio playing it on the piano. It's not anything that should be played on a piano. It's not, it's kind of a weird thing." I said, "I'll come up to your office." And he said, "Were you going to bring a band up or something?" I said, "No, I'll just come up and I'll do the theme for you." So I get up to the office, and Costello is there. He's sitting on the sofa, and Curtis is there. He's putting golf balls. He was a great golfer. And maybe he still is, for all I know. And he said, "Okay, what is it?" So I said, "All right, just open your mind." And it's a low flute and a high wee thing going on. And it goes like it goes. And I'm shaking my head around doing all this number, and he looks at me and his eyes light up, and he says, I love it, it's sensational, it's great, blah, 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 blah. So that was the theme with Dark Shadows, and that was how I got involved. And, now, what is it, 25 years later, 30 years later, 190 years later?
Welcome to the Dark Shadows podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Tom Diamond, and Keith Chowell, bringing you all the odd goings-on from Collinsport, Maine.
Hello, welcome to the Rondo-nominated Literary License Podcast, Dark Shadows episodes, where we'll be covering episodes 201 to 219. And today we have with us Vicky Ray. Hello, Vicky.
Hey, guys.
And Tom Diamond. Hello, Tom.
Hey, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. And it's only a week later. Isn't that something?
Yep, time flies.
And what we like to do is find out what we've been up to. So we're going to do our Roses and Thorns section of our podcast, where we talk about what we liked this week and what we hated this week. So we'll start with Tom. Tom, what did you like this week and what did you dislike this week?
The rose that I have to report is my diet. I am now down 50 pounds, 50.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
I feel lighter. I'm not running the decathlon yet, but
Give you time. We'll give you time.
Oh, absolutely. You'll see
You'll
me.
be running down the beach to Chariots of Fire in no time.
I'll be representing the podcast. And you'll see me just running in slow motion.
We can do that.
I'll represent the podcast in the Olympics. So that will be, or hopefully not the Special Olympics. So that part is good. I'm able to move around a lot better. There's still little hills and valleys. And I saw a bag of potato chips the other day, which my fiance forgot to hide. And I said, well, the day before, I cheated slightly. I bought a small bag of Doritos, but that wasn't too bad, and I still lost 3 pounds the next day. And I said, "Oh, great! So now I'll take the next step." But those potato chips were full of grease, and the next day,
Doritos aren't.
Well, actually, for potato chips, you might want to look at. I don't know if they have them in the U.S., but in the U.K. they have them, and I buy because Isaac's dieting at the moment. Yeah. And he's doing very well on his. But I buy him. But once a week, I buy him reduced calorie crisps or potato chips, and they're reduced calorie, and they're something like
less oil,
very very low, and it's like for like a whole big bag of them.
I don't think I've seen them over in Texas. I don't know about where you are.
So. You should look at them. They taste really nice. Actually, they come from Marks and Spencers in this country. I haven't seen them in any other shop.
I think we have. I think you guys are a little more health conscious over in the UK than we are here. Because you guys got more whatever for your no Monsanto and all that other.
Well, maybe I'll find a way to smuggle some over to Tom so you can.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
I could bring some over. Or I can mail them to him when I'm there. There we go.
Yeah,
we'll mail him a care package.
I'll give you a care package of reduced calories because they taste really nice. They're the only ones I eat now because they taste better than the full fat ones. So.
I don't like a lot of grease anyway either.
And if it don't work, I'll know who to blame, and my fiance will be after both of you. So my thorn is that this morning I woke up to find that. No, actually, it was yesterday. Woke up to find that the ceiling was leaking from upstairs. We live in a 2-family, and the asshole left the bathroom sink running.
Oh no!
Oh
that
yes.
Does blow.
Oh yes. So luckily we're moving out of here in a few weeks, but there's a nice water stain on the ceiling now.
You're moving, aren't you?
What's that?
You're moving, aren't you?
Yeah, a few weeks. To a 2-bedroom near where she lives now, very close to where she lives now. So that's going to be coming up. So, but we still had to have. It was around 8:30 in the morning that we discovered it, and we had the guy over, and he's got this big, I don't know what the hell you call it, but it's something that sucks up the water that I'm supposed to have on when I don't have the podcast on, because otherwise it sounds like somebody's drilling in the street, and you'd never be able to hear anything. So you have to step over things in order to get into the bathroom, which is inconvenient. A small portion of the rug was lifted so that we could get at the water. It seeped into the bedroom closet a little bit, but not too bad. So that was my thorn. I needed that like a hole in the head. But
think of it. You can turn it into your exercise routine. Tom be nimble, Tom be quick. Tom jumps over.
I'll jump over a candlestick. Yeah, that's for sure. And with Collinwood, there are plenty of candlesticks to jump over.
We're getting to the candle aspects now.
Exactly. Oh, plenty of candle. Oh, even more next year. Even
because
more.
Because of Lord Voldemort there. Yeah.
We'll go back in time.
Well, we can mention him.
Today we're introducing Voldemort. We're giving away his. We're giving his identity.
We can finally talk about he who has no name.
He'll have a name now, that's for sure. But anyway, that's my rose and thorn.
What about yourself, Vicky? What's your rose and thorn?
Oh, God, rose. I'm such a miserable bitch half the time. I'm trying to think of a good rose. Well, Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I'm flying home to New York. My dad isn't so hot, but I've always liked seeing people, or not many people, just very few, but I always enjoy visiting my family. But they're having a frickin' blizzard right now. It's like I'm hoping by Monday it's gone.
So it's snowing inside the houses of upstate New York and outside the houses due to
They're
their
on the
crack
Weather
habits.
Channel today here. It's just like Watertown never makes the Weather Channel and has the crew there. They have them in Adams, they have them in Watertown, and they have them in Sackett's, and it's just, they're getting hammered. They're like getting feet. It's just kind of funny. And I go, it's like, well, I'm in Texas right now, and here's the sun, but hopefully it'll probably melt by the time I get there. Any luck.
Well, you'll be slapped in the face with your childhood memories as soon as you land there.
I know. Oh, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just there to help mom and dad. But I have to say, and this is probably a lot of people's thorn, I'm so sick of the coronavirus. I'm sick of the mania and the frenzy and the fear, and just everybody's afraid to go out. It's like, we can't fly here, we can't fly there. Now people are selling starter packs for the next 2-3 years in case you have to board up the house. So we can eat freeze-dried split pea soup and bacon and eggs in 25 years. Right. You know, it's like, people need to chill. It's not The Walking Dead yet. Everybody calm the fuck down.
Well, if it was The Walking Dead, there's plenty of people I would throw over to that side of the world.
Well, I know they're doing it over there, though. People are just freaking out, and it's just like the flu kills more people.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
I mean,
it sells newspapers and keeps bait clicking going, doesn't it? So
yes, it does. But I hate seeing people scared to death, especially the elderly, and you know, it does seem to like people with lung problems, though. But,
well, that's with most flus. That's with most viruses, anyways. Old people.
Just gotta wash your hand. Don't pick your nose, for the love of God. Wash your hands. You know.
Well, the nurses are having a field day because that's what they were brought up on. So now this justifies their existence by saying that everybody's got to wash their hands. And,
but it's true, though. It does eliminate a lot. Washing your hands. And like, I'm going to probably, I found this little spray bottles of Lysol for the plane, and I'm going to spray my seat, and anybody that sits next to me already knows I am so ready. But I mean, seriously, you know, I mean, I just figure if it's my time, it's my time, but I'm not going to get taken out by no damn virus.
Well, they are talking about a potential vaccine in 6 months. Israel's got something going. I just heard about it today.
We just got to like stay in the United States and never go anywhere. You just like, they did limit China. You know, when I was coming back from St. Croix a couple weeks back, I did notice I did not see one Asian person anywhere to be seen. Maybe one.
Well, that's because they're scared to go out because people are bullying them in the streets because of the media.
Probably. I've heard of that, but I'm sure that's next. Because
they closed all the schools in Japan. They closed all the schools in Japan.
Well, I have to say that when this first broke over here, you know, the way the media covered it was pretty much ostracizing Chinese people,
That's not right.
Asian descent, and so much so that then a week later, then they have the same journalists writing, we don't understand why people are ostracizing these people. Like, because you guys have done it. You guys are the one that started this. So
I was telling Tom just before, you know, we started getting on here, and I'll make it quick. But we had 2 cases of Ebola here 4 years ago, and they called it the Ebola outbreak. And only 2 people, one gentleman from Liberia had it. He passed away, but one nurse caught it. And everybody was going to the grocery stores, buying bread and milk like a blizzard was happening, and rice, everything else, because they thought they were going to have to hunker down for the spread of Ebola in downtown Dallas.
God.
Well,
that's what the media does.
My grandmother used to say, if ignorance is bliss, there's a lot of happy people out there.
Yeah.
I live outside of Dallas, so I'm not worried about it.
Well, to be honest, I work in a hospital, and we're the disease center for London as far as all these things like Ebola, coronavirus, and SARS. So we get people in all the time. So, and I've been fine so far. Sorry, no kidding.
You're such a humanitarian, Keith.
I'm glad I'm not in the same room with you, Keith. I'm glad I'm not in the same room.
My rose, it has to be the Amazon Prime series Hunters, which I thoroughly love.
That too. I love it.
Yep, unanimous.
I couldn't I digest this fast enough. I basically sat through a whole day and a half, just done it all. Fantastic.
Talk about watching the bad guy get it. eventually.
And, well, talk about twists and turns without giving anything away. Fantastic.
Right.
Really like that.
Well, a lot of it is set in Brooklyn, my hometown.
And
Yep,
it's
it
based
is,
on a
isn't
true
it?
story. So I don't know how far they
Partially
ran with the
true.
true story. So inspired by a true event. So.
Inspired. I think I recall there were groups back in the day.
And I said the acting was top notch, the writing was top notch. It kept you interested.
Exactly.
It went 100 miles per hour as soon as it started, first episode, and didn't let up.
No,
and it kept
it doesn't.
you thoroughly enjoyed. And it was action packed. It was sad. There's a lot of heartbreak in it.
There was a lot of heartbreak.
And I think
and a lot of the stuff
people,
that went on when they flash back to the history of, I'm not going to give it away, but I mean, that's always heartbreaking. That's just such a horrible period of time.
And who would have thought that Al Pacino could play such a great role as an Orthodox Jewish guy?
I know. What a yenta.
That's right. Talks like this. This is the thing you got to remember. He talks like this, like my grandmother did with the chicken soup and with the tzimmes. And oy vey, what can I tell you? He was good. He's good.
The only problem with a main actor that way that's been around for like our whole lives, it feels like, is that when they do flashbacks of, maybe when he was younger, it's like you always knew what he looked like when he was younger. So sometimes you're like, But you always get that with any actor that you get that's so well known, and because you've grown up with them, and then you see a younger actor playing them.
But he's doing such a good job being the old guy. I love it.
He's fantastic. No, I'm nothing against him whatsoever. I'm just sitting there saying that sometimes you're just going to
Oh, he's been pigeonholed into Don Corleone or Michael Corleone. So.
I think this is a breakout role for him that way.
Yeah.
I think it's going to do quite well in the next year's award seasons. I think it's going to get some good notices.
Excellent series.
I think it'll be around for a few years if Amazon and we know Amazon knows what's good for them. But I think it's a very. But everybody is talking about that show. It's going to be a hit.
My other rose is the Netflix series called Gentrified, which is produced by America Ferrera, dealing with the gentrification of a Mexican American suburb of Los Angeles. Very, very good. It's heartwarming. It's sad. It's funny. But it deals with some really interesting issues going on with gentrification. That basically you join us or you don't, and how they're pushing all these communities out to bring in like these young, hip, yuppie people. Especially like people who are consider themselves like so woke, but at the same time, these people who are being so woke, saying that they're saving these areas, are actually making these area people all go homeless. But it deals with everything in a very, very interesting way, and it's one of the best series I've seen on Netflix.
What's it called again?
Another one, Gentrified. It deals, and some of it's in Spanish and some of it's in American. The older generation speaks Spanish because that's what they do. And I said it's America Ferrera. If you don't know who she is, you probably remember her from Ugly Betty. She was Ugly Betty. So she's now producing, directing, and writing, and this is fantastic. I highly recommend.
Well, good for her.
And my thorn of the week is that I've been on holiday up until Thursday. Went back to work yesterday, and God, I just. I could not have come out of a rich person's vagina. Why did I have to work?
Did you bring those poor girls donuts today?
No. Oh my God. No, I just couldn't be bothered. I just thought to myself,
asshole. You are such a prick.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought to myself, they kind of deserved the backlash that I gave them. But I mean, it wasn't one of my most winning speeches to give, but it kind of went down like a lead balloon. But I did apologize, but I did buy them sourdough bagels from Mark's.
There you go. Food is always the way. There you go.
Yeah, so I didn't buy them donuts. I bought them a healthy option, because they're all gaining weight and getting fat. No, I'm kidding.
They don't listen to this, I hope.
Well, we'll soon find out on Monday. I go back to work. But no, I mean, I guess it's just having time off and then going back in the swing of it. I always find it's a bit.
It's always hard to get back into it.
Then after next week, I'll be there I'll be back there at my regular hours, and I'll just get back in the swing of things, and life will just take off, and I'll be rushing towards death at a faster pace than I am at the moment. So. But yeah, so that's our roses and thorns. So that brings us to our Out of the Shadows segment with Tom Diamond. So Tom, what's been going on in the Dark Shadows, the bloopers and guest stars and people appearing?
Well, it's been a busy week. Something sad to report, unfortunately, and most of the Dark Shadows world is now aware. that Robert Cobert, he's the guy responsible for the music on Dark Shadows. When you hear da da da, that's him, along with everything else. He passed
Quentin's
away.
theme and Josette's
Quentin's theme, a lot more than that. The second version of Josette's theme, actually, he was responsible for, because there was the first one was actually copyrighted from another author, but not to say. So he died of pneumonia, 95 years old. Had a long life.
Longevity in this
long
cast.
life.
He also worked in films as well. Didn't he also do Burnt Offerings as well, and
all of
films
them
like that as well?
And
War and Remembrance, I think he worked on that as well.
Absolutely, but that's exactly. You don't even have to read the biography that I'm going to very briefly read, and that's courtesy of Kathy Resch, who posted this in Shadowgram. And he passed. Actually, I'm going to correct myself. He passed away on February 19th of 2020. He did work in film, television, theater, and ballet, embracing jazz, classical, folk, pop, rhythm and blues, rock, and even disco. And as you said, Keith, he has done a lot of stuff with Dan Curtis, such as The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is great. That was on primetime on ABC in 1968 with Jack Palance. The Night Stalker, Trilogy of Terror.
Oh yeah.
Burnt Offerings, the Dracula with Dracula again, also with Jack Palance, and Intruders, Winds of War and Remembrance.
Yep.
He was born in New York, went to Juilliard in New York, and he studied composition at Columbia University. He was at the beginning of his career, he had gigs at the Stork Club. He collaborated on several pop songs in the 50s, recorded by artists such as Freddie Martin and Francis Wayne, and the folk musical Frankie and Johnny. He worked with David Susskind and wrote music for the suspense series Way Out, special presentations of The Heiress, Scarlet Pimpernel, and Heaven Can Wait. People may not know, but he was responsible for game show themes for Password and the $25,000. That's Jeopardy.
Oh,
That's Jeopardy. Skelly, you're a goose. Keith, you're a goose. As they say in Britain, go spend a penny somewhere.
Well, okay.
Keith is turning fuchsia.
Okay.
At this point. So that's the long running. Okay. Also, he did The Last Ride of the Dalton Gang, Love Letter, Kansas City Massacre, Bonanza Next Generation, and he wrote for The Doctors. His final score.
Had a Next Generation.
Yeah. I didn't know that either. His final score was the 2005 Showtime film Our Fathers. And, of course, you mentioned Quentin's theme, one of his best works. He is survived by 3 children and 6 grandchildren. His wife predeceased him. Rest in peace. We tried to get a sound snippet of him, and unfortunately, due to copyright issues, and I'm not going to go into details, we were unable to print this, but he did, or I should say, to broadcast it. But he did do a Q&A session in 2016 at the Hollywood Women's Convention, and the person who filmed that, who filmed that, Norman Fisher, and I will give him credit, posted it on one of my favorite websites, Welcome Back to Collinwood, and between him and Paul Sousa, the administrator, who my hats are off to both of them, we were able to hear it. And to be very brief, he was a really saucy guy because he was born in Brooklyn, so he could cuss just about with anybody, and I think Vicky would have loved him had he been on here. And he talked about how he met Curtis. It appears that Bob Costello, the producer of Dark Shadows, and his kids both went to the same private school. So the two of them got together, and history was made. And he visited Dan. And the other funny thing that happened in that clip was when somebody asked him, somebody who was going to ask him a question, said, "I have to tell you something. Every time my wife tells me my mother-in-law is on the phone, I hear da da da." In my mind, and Cobert nearly fell on the floor from laughter with that. So once again, rest in peace.
Sadly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on now to the new people in the show. The big thing here is the introduction of Jonathan Frid as Barnabas in episode. Actually, he appeared for the first time in episode 211, although they've been building up to him ever since the early episodes in this block with his portrait. And Jonathan was born in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
I didn't know he was born in Hamilton.
Yes, he certainly
our
was.
neck of the woods.
Yeah,
Certainly
I just didn't
was.
know he was born in Hamilton, though.
Yep. His family
He is kind of Canookish, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yep. Family comes from there. They actually owned the business there. I think it was Bricklaying or something like that. And Jonathan, of course, had a very, very distinguished career as a Shakespearean actor before he went into Dark Shadows.
That shows.
Absolutely. And Shakespearean acting was really his true love. And so it took him a while, and of course we're going to talk about that. It took him a while to adapt himself to playing a vampire on a soap. But he did it. But he did it extremely well.
Yes,
And when he came on, the show completely took a different turn. And he became a matinee idol almost instantly. Fans were writing him letters from all over the place. It was they realized once he came on that Dark Shadows was going to last for a while. Jonathan, of course, also had reprised his role in the House of Dark Shadows in 1971. Did a Canadian film called Seizure, which was very good in 1973.
I haven't heard of that one.
It's because it's not broadcast too much. You have to look on the web for it, but you
What's it called? Seizure?
Seizure.
Never heard of that one.
Yep. Look for it. Canadian film, by the way, too.
Okay.
And Christina Pickles from St. Elsewhere was his co-star.
Oh, no kidding.
Absolutely, yeah. And he did that, and To the Devil, was it To the Devil a Daughter or The Devil's Daughter? And that was an ABC TV movie film. And it was very unfortunate. His talents weren't utilized. He played a mute, and he never said one word through the whole picture.
No way.
Yeah. With Shelley Winters was in it. And
he didn't get to stumble through his lines.
Yeah, no, didn't have to stumble. It was. Oh, you're mean. Oh, Jonathan is looking down on you. I will get you, Keith. I will get you. Oh, that's my Frid imitation, which I can now start to use. He's no. I met him. I was honored to know him. In the 1980s, a few of us who had gone to the Dark Shadows conventions were asked to come to his apartment as he was rehearsing for what became his one-man show.
No pictures?
No pick. I
photos.
I had a picture with him, and I lost it. And I'm kicking myself.
You've got to be kidding me. We could have posted that on our website.
I know. To this day, I'm very mad that I lost it.
We'll have to use a shot of Jonathan Frid and Louis Edmonds and.
However, I do have a picture of my. But I do want to say, and he was associated with, the organization was called Clunes and Associates, which was run by Mary O'Leary, who we have spoken with, and who will be. And we have interviewed her, and she's going to be later on this year. But she ran that, and Mary was working with the Guiding Light at the time as an associate producer. So anyway, a group of us were asked to attend. We were all thrilled and honored. Maybe next time I'll talk about how I actually met him. I didn't meet him actually there. And I do have a picture of all of us sitting in his apartment. Not him, but so maybe that's.
What do you do? Take a picture of y'all sitting in his apartment?
Who are these people? Click, click, click.
I know. Well, I didn't take the picture.
Oh my God, I would have killed myself. You had a picture like that, you can't find it.
I was so mad. I was so mad. I kill myself to this day. Okay, so anyway, we'll have a lot more to talk about Jonathan as things progress. Moving on, the other big thing was John Carlin, who took over the role of Willie Loomis, starting in episode 206. And of course, I'm sure we're going to talk about the range that he gave to that character and what endeared him to the fans. We note that a couple of people come back. Dana Elcar came back as Sheriff Patterson in episode 219. I had missed him. And,
okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I had missed him. Well, yeah, we're going to talk about, Barnabas is biting cows and draining their blood.
Yeah, and it's always the cattle that get it for no matter what show. They're always draining the blood of somebody's ranch cows and shit.
And they never go after the horses. For some reason, they never go after the horses. It's always the cows.
I don't think he could reach the horse. The horse would probably kick him in the nuts. But the poor cows, the poor calves, and Joe's uncle was the victim of that because he had a farm, and that's how that starts. Anyway, so that's Dana Elcar. Then our favorite Daniel Keyes, the caretaker. Evil lurks here.
Don't be making fun of him. He's my man. He's my boy.
Comes back in episode 211, and I think
I still don't know if he's human or not.
I still think he's either a specter or just some whacked out old dude.
Isn't it great to see him? And,
smoking the reefer in the 50s.
He stays on for a while. Blue Whale Extras. We see Bob O'Connell once again as the favorite bartender in episodes 213 and 216. George McCoy, another friend of Dan Curtis, who comes back as one of the patrons in episodes 213 and 216. Other Blue Whale Extras, which we will never hear from again, are Millicent France from episode 207. Tom Gorman, who will come back in other day roles. He passed away in 1971, by the way. Michelle Metvitas, and I apologize for mispronouncing the name in area code. In episode 207, I had parentheses in my notes, and I thought it was an area code. Okay, Timothy Gordon. Who the hell is Timothy Gordon? He has a very pivotal role in Dark Shadows. Do you remember in episode 210 when the hand comes up out of the coffin to choke Willie?
That's him?
That is Timothy Gordon.
What was so special about his hand?
Because it appears.
He was a hand model.
That's what I was thinking.
I could say hand job, but I don't want to get too.
I know. I was like, my mind was.
I don't want to get too. That might have happened when he went up to Bangor. No, but seriously. So why is he famous? Because he comes back in other episodes as other hands. They hired him every time they needed a hand.
He probably was he. I bet he was a hand model because they used to have hand models, didn't they? They would play people's hands. So.
The Dawn dish. You remember the dish liquid ads and stuff back then.
They were always hand models, though. They were never the actresses that were speaking the lines.
Well, there's a rumor that Thing from the Addams Family.
Doesn't it? No, wait.
No, it was Thing. Not cousin. Yeah, Thing got him. Thing might have gotten him the job. No, I'm kidding. Okay, okay. Let's see. Yeah. Beverly Dixon is also a Blue Whale extra, and 215, and she occurred episode 215. She occurred in Mork and Mindy. She went on to do guest shots in Mork and Mindy, Kojak, and was in the movie Graduation Day.
No, I've seen Graduation Day.
Not recall that
bad
one.
film. So bad that I quite enjoy it.
Oh, that's okay.
One of those early
Okay.
slasher films in the 80s that they popped out like in 2 days. One of those.
Well, Beverly Dixon was in that. She graduated. And finally, people may remember Dr. Woodard
Of
from
course.
episode
Yes.
219. Now, there were 3 actors that played Dr. Woodard.
Yep.
And this one, actually, it was not credited in the end credits, but the actor who played him was Richard Woods, who passed away in January of 2001 in Englewood, New Jersey. And he went on to do Miller's Crossing in 1990.
Okay.
That was a movie. In and Out in 1997. And something
I love
called,
In and Out. I've seen that. That's the one with Kevin Kline and Tom Selleck, where Kevin Kline's coming out of the closet.
Uh-huh.
And Debbie Reynolds is in that.
Oh my
Great
God, I
film.
love Kevin Kline. He's so goddamn funny.
Well, Richard Woods was in that, and he was also in a movie called Hudsucker Proxy, and I have no idea what that's about, in 1994.
Coen Brothers film about the newspaper industry.
Okay, Keith, you got me there. Okay, so moving on to the bloopers, and we have a number of those. In episode 201, we have a cute little verbal gaffe by Burke. He can't pronounce hypocritical, and he says hypocritical. It's kind of like
He did that a few times.
It might have been the alcohol.
Slam.
Once again, no comment. We're all in a great mood today, friends. Okay.
Hey, this is light.
To be honest, though, it's common knowledge. I'm not shedding any shade here or any gossip. He says this in one of the interviews on one of the discs of the Dark Shadows coffin set. There's an interview where he talks about his problem at that time. So
sure,
yeah.
and not only that, the cast really tried to help him out. They really tried to help him out, and we'll go into that later. Anyway, moving on, in that episode 201, you'll see Sam. There's a fleeting camera shadow moving across Sam. Well, one of the things I never figured out was in episode 201, Carolyn all of a sudden hates Jason McGuire. Originally, she was fawning all over him. She loved him.
Well, that's until she realized he's being a real shit, though. She knew something was up.
Well, I mean, when we go into it, I mean, it was kind of like a switch over. He hadn't done anything to her yet.
Yet.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
It's almost like the writers forgot what they were doing the day before.
Yeah, and so you see this and you say, wait a minute, I thought she liked him. Now all of a sudden she hates him. I mean, what the heck's going on? So I agree with Keith. Then when Liz startles Jason, and you're gonna hear, "Oh, did I startle you?" more and more often with the characters. Jason was trying to open up the basement hidden room, and Liz startled him. But Jason says, "Who is this? Who is this? I can't see anybody." And we can clearly see it's Liz, and has a flashlight, and it's pointing in all different directions. How Bert could have missed who that was, I will never know. Okay, then we're okay for a couple episodes until episode 204, and then we get a shadow of the camera on the Collinwood door, while Willie and I forgot, and I don't know why I didn't mention this. Of course, Jimmy Hall is still on for 4 episodes in this block, and we mustn't forget that. So while Jimmy Hall and Nancy Barrett, who played Carolyn, are talking, you see the shadow of the camera on the door. Now, also in episode 204, you see Barnabas's portrait in the credits. However, this is before Barnabas's portrait is even introduced in 205, when we see
Where
Jimmy
actually
Hall.
does this portrait come from is my big question.
I know. They didn't find it in the attic and just take it.
All of a sudden.
Because it wasn't there in the 200 episodes previously. Mrs. Johnson found it when she was dusting. Oh, look this up.
Well, land sakes, Nobody leaves anything around here. It's unbelievable.
Can't find Sam's paintings, but we found this picture of Barnabas.
That's a good. That's very good. Well, I will, and of course, the story behind that was Bob Costello, the producer, posed for the portrait, and he was in the getup, but they didn't have the actor picked back at that point, so they painted everything except the face.
Oh,
And
cool! I didn't know that.
Yeah, and when Jonathan was picked, then they painted the face and they put.
Did not know that.
Yep.
I wonder whatever happened to that painting. Somebody has that somewhere.
I think it was sold at a convention, but I'm not sure.
I just wonder where things like that end up because it's so iconic, you know.
I should track that down. I'll probably have an answer for you. By the way, the name of Barnabas, and that's also interesting, Robert Costello got that from a tombstone in Flushing, Queens, I believe. Definitely in Queens. So he happened to be in the cemetery looking for a strange name that he could give the character to. Found that name, and that's how Barnabas came to be.
I like the name Barnabas. That's a good name, actually.
I actually do like it myself. Well, then they come with Jeremiah and Joshua. They do the biblical stuff for the period time.
Yes,
so.
Absolutely. And
but Barnabas doesn't really fit in with any biblical anything. So.
Well, there's a lot of them churches are called like St. Barnabas churches and stuff like that.
So there's definitely something in there. You know, so in that episode, Carolyn pulls the gun on Willie, and we see there's a black barrel. But I was kind of wondering whether it was the same gun because you get a really good view of the gun in the drawer in the next episode, 205, and you see that it's it looks silver. Of course, it's black and white, but you see that it looks silver
with a pearl handle, doesn't it?
With a pearl handle, exactly. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't see when Carolyn just took the gun in 204 and pointed at him. We couldn't see whether it was the same gun because she was hiding the handle. It looked black. The whole thing looked black to me, but it is possible it was the same gun.
The Willie also, that makes you feel dirty.
Me too, Willie.
You also see in episode 205, if you look very closely, you're going to see the shadow of the camera on the books on the desk in the drawing room. You have a few books that are upright, and where I believe Liz may have been sitting there. I'm not sure. Also, in 205, James Hall makes a little voice blooper. Instead of saying, "I'm so sick of these punks," he said, "I am so sick of these punkers." And that might have been his southern accent coming through. I'm not sure. You will notice that the shadow of the mic is on James Hall's blonde hair. Also as he's talking. And that's very interesting because now we go to episode 206. John Carlin has taken over the role of Jimmy Hall, and John Carlin's hair is dark. It's probably brown. So 1 minute it's blonde and the next minute it's dark. Did he get a dye job?
Samantha, I think we got a Darren situation going on here.
A very good blooper in 206 is Burke and Vicky are talking in Burke's hotel room. You can get a great view of the teleprompter, which is seen scrolling in the reflection of the picture on the wall in Burke's room. And even though there are tracking shots, you still see the teleprompter going back and forth. You see that for a little while. Okay. Well, now in 208, David is now talking about his ancestors with Willie, and Abigail Collins is described as David's great-grandmother 4 times removed. And as you're going to see, that's changed much later on. Abigail was actually an old maid. So we don't know what that
with a hidden past.
Yes.
Clearly.
Spent a lot of time in a convent when she was younger. No one knows why.
So how she wound up being David's, of course, that was the writers at that time. They were just putting something in. Okay. Let's see. Now episode... and in episode 209, when the caretaker is talking, I think to Jason, and he says, Naomi Collins died of old age. That is also inaccurate because, as we will see later on, unless we call Joan Bennett who portrayed Naomi, an old woman, she committed suicide. So she certainly didn't die of old age, and of course we're going to talk about that when we get to that. You will see mic and camera shadows by the front door, by the side of the door in the doorway, if you look very carefully. Okay. And in episode 210, you will see the shadow of the camera crawling up Willie's back, and that you can't miss.
I think that the camera shadows and the mic shadows are just a running theme throughout the first whatever.
Absolutely, you're going to see those throughout.
I think it's because they got the light. They get the way they're lighting it. If they light it from up above instead of down below, up down below instead of up above. That's the reason why. Actually, the lighting must be behind the cameras. So.
Yeah,
absolutely. The another very good one was when Willie pulls the ring on top of the crypt in order to open the door, which leads to Barnabas's coffin. Well, the whole thing is supposed to be made of stone, but when he pulls up the top of the ring, it's actually made of wood because the piece attached to the ring pops up along with the ring. You gotta look at that very closely to see that. Eagle Hill Cemetery was originally called Eagles Hill Cemetery in the prior episode, but they straightened that out. Now in episode 213, a lot of these bloopers. In episode 213, Bert and Carolyn are having a drink at the Blue Whale. She sits down in the bar with her coat on. We then fade out, fade back in, and now we see Carolyn sitting, but her coat is off and hanging around the chair. So how did that get there? She sat down with her coat on, and boom, probably
her bullet bra pushed it back.
Oh my God, those bullet bras! I just don't know who made women's undergarments back then. There's just no way. A
lot of wiring went on in those.
That they had back then that they had to wear.
Yeah, I think Nancy Barrett got a little too warm in the coat, so she said, "Come on, guys, let me take this coat off."
Probably, poor thing.
Yes, that was 213. Going back to 212, David Hennessy comes up with a very rare voice gaffe. He's supposed to say "when the sun rises over the ocean," but he actually then says when the sun rises over the ocean, and you see him shaking his head like oh shit, That's a very rare. That's only the second time I've ever caught a blooper from David Hennessy, who did such a marvelous job with his lines. There is a shadow of the mic over Barnabas's portrait in episode 212. Then we go to episode 214, and in episode 214, there is a light in the old house to the left of Josette's portrait in the ceiling. A very good, interesting, and this was an accidental blooper. So Barnabas's line is, so the chandelier is motionless in the old house. Picture this. And Barnabas, I think, is talking to Vicky, and he says, it will take a long time. It will take a long time until this place falls apart. And then you see the chandelier start to move after he says that, because probably a mic boom hit the chandelier. So that part is also good. In episode 215, we have a different picture of the Blue Whale. Actually, the Blue Whale was modeled after a restaurant called the Black Pearl in Newport, Rhode Island. And it is still standing today, to my knowledge. So those exteriors are of the Black Pearl. They just did a different picture of that. Also, there is, in Willie's room in 216, there is movement under the door, and that is Jason McGuire probably waiting to make his entrance. So while the camera is panning on Willie, you see the movement through the door. I guess he's moving back and forth. 218, classic blooper. Barnabas is walking out of the cemetery, and he leans his hand on a cross. Now, anybody that's a vampire fan knows what happens when you touch a cross, Keith.
You find Jesus.
No. Vicky, what happens when you put your hand on a cross? And when
They're supposedly supposed to recoil and start frying. But,
Well, that's one
modern
thing.
vampires do not have a problem with the crucifix or garlic for that matter.
Well, the real
But I think crucifixes do come into play with Barnabas later on, though, in future storylines, don't they? So.
Where he recoils. But it's not only that. A vampire touches a cross, it burns his flesh. And that's something that we see in the Christopher Lee movies.
Right.
Or maybe it's like serving vegetarian meat. If they don't know it's not meat, they don't notice it. So maybe maybe he doesn't see that's a cross. Maybe he's okay. It's like when he sees it across it burns.
Anyway, he walked through like he was leaning on the cross for support. It's a good thing because all those gravestones were paper mache. They were styrofoam, and it's a good thing it didn't. And you'll see that
every once in a while when you see them at Eagle Hill Cemetery. If you're watching where there was stepping, you could tell it's turf because it looks like a blanket twisting underneath their feet. I did catch that.
Yep. We also see in that episode dry ice in the mausoleum causing the dry ice effect, where we didn't see that before. And that's that again. Those two were in episode 218, and finally in 219. Well, of course, Barnabas bit Willie's wrist, and the reason for that is that they didn't want to show one man biting another man in the neck. So
that's right.
Because they were concerned about the censors. So they had Willie's wrist covered up in a bandage, and when it's finally taken off, you do see some what looks like bite marks originally, but in 219 it's gone. Also in 219, when Willie wobbles into the room, there's a shadow of someone underneath the door. And finally, a very interesting line that is, well, I'll let you answer this, Keith. So Dr. Woodard says after he's examined Willie, there is no infection and no viral disease. Keith, what's wrong with that line?
No infection.
Well,
no infection, therefore no virus.
Precisely. The two are not
synonymous
with each other.
Correct.
Infections, bacterial, viruses, something else. So.
Keith, you got it. We're gonna. You won the contest. Where you can give yourself a prize.
I want a hoodie. For my shirt. I've been doing this shit with him for years, and I've gotten jacked.
Yeah. Thank you for warning me, Vicky.
You won't get shit either, Tom.
Listen, I'm making my emotional punching bag. What more do you want out of me?
Yes, we live for that, Keith. We do live for that. But yes, you're absolutely right, Keith. It would have been a bacterial diagnosis, not a viral diagnosis. And perhaps he could have said there was no swelling, therefore there was no bacterial diagnosis.
I have to say, though, in defense of the modern vampire, those are really lame-o bites. Because
he was gentle with Willie.
Okay, whatever. He had little teeth.
It was Willie's first time. Little Willie won't go.
Also, you got to remember he was having fun with the cattle. So
that's true.
So maybe Willie was just something on the side. You know, he just needed to have Willie as his servant, and he does take on a Renfield character.
Yes, he does. He is Renfield the whole way.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is also something to discuss. But anyway, those are the bloopers from the Dark Shadows world during this block.
Now we come to our Into the Shadows, which gives us news from Collinswood, Maine. Take it away, Vicky.
And this is Vicky Ray, and this is the news from Collinsport, Maine. Burke, Devlin, and Sam, finally, after long periods of toing and froing, have confronted Roger about that sorry night 10 years ago. It is now apparent that Roger was driving the car that hit the curb hugger all those nights ago. Burke states that he will not let this rest, and with a mechanical laugh is going after the Collins fortune. Meanwhile, nasty Me Too Willie starts a fight with Joe after sliming up against Maggie and then joins Jason to be an additional unwelcome house guest. Willie makes a somewhat good impression on Mrs. Johnson before vacating to the study. Jason tries to lie and swarm his way around Willie staying at Collingwood before actually facing Elizabeth. Blackmailing Elizabeth to make Willie stay in the big house, Willie is also making sexual advances on Victoria to the point where she feels that she was inappropriately touched in a naughty place. Elizabeth walks in on them in the nick of time, but Vicky decides to go quiet, and Jason holds Elizabeth in his spider web. Victoria grows concerned about Elizabeth's incapable way of not dealing with Jason and Willie. Carolyn gets sexually accosted by Willie and pulls a gun on him after much taunting. Willie goes up to bed and then the next morning tells her mother about the encounter and the gun. Elizabeth is concerned but unable to help, but glare at Willie and waste oxygen trying to talk to Jason. She does state that Willie has to go. Victoria and Carolyn are not comfortable with a suspected ravisher. Jason tells Willie he needs to go, and Me Too Willie becomes fascinated with the portrait of Barnabas with jewels, which seem to include a ring, some war medals, which God only knows how he got those, and an Olympic gold medal he wears around his neck. I prefer manhole cover. Apparently, he is good at cliff diving, but more on this later episodes. Willie asks Mrs. Johnson about Colin's family jewels being buried with them, and although Mrs. Johnson does not know too much about this, she does get a kick out of this rebel without a clue Willie. Burke makes an offer to Elizabeth to help deal with Jason and Willie, but this seems to be lose favor that doesn't have much in the way of fruition. Burke and Willie get in a fight at the Blue Whale after Victoria gets accosted by Willie yet once again. Jason tells Willie that he needs to leave, but will secure money from Elizabeth to set him on his way. He also tells the new Willie that he needs time to ensure his get-rich-quick plans to come to light. Willie talks to David about the family jewels buried with the dead. Willie does some investigation and finds that they could be in the family crypt after finding some clues to see where these may be concerning a lion's head. Willie goes to Eagle Hill Cemetery, 5 miles from Collinswood, and starts to hear a heartbeat. The crypt keeper warns Willie about this, as the new Willie is now a new personality with a likable victim persona. We now feel some concern about him. He finds a chained coffin in the secret room and starts to unchain the coffin whilst Elizabeth demands that Willie must go. Willie opens the coffin to be grabbed by a hand. The next evening, Barnabas, a long-lost cousin from England, appears and introduces himself to the family. Apparently, Barnabas is into cosplay and loves dressing as his favorite Colin's ancestor. People are wondering where new Willie is, as his bed has not been slept in and all of his stuff is there, although he was supposed to have left. It is suspected that he is partying down in the metropolis that is Collinsport. Barnabas returns to the old house and starts talking to Josette's portrait. Josette refuses to come out of the painting or let herself be known, as her ghostly presence is on mute. Carolyn the next day tries to find out what hold Jason McGuire has over Elizabeth, but no answers are forthcoming. She does learn that Jason and her father were friends. Barnabas that night makes another appearance at Collinwood and meets Roger and Carolyn, who both comment on his uncanny cosplay and the portrait that just seems to appear in the foyer. Considering that this portrait hasn't been up in the foyer for past 200 episodes, no one seems to even notice. Meanwhile, at the Blue Whale, Jason runs into Willie, who seems out of sorts, and there is blood on his sleeve, which Jason seems to be a bit concerned about. He tells Willie to go back to Collinwood and forces him to apologize to Carolyn and Elizabeth, though I guess it is okay to accost Victoria because he doesn't have to apologize to her. Jason notices bite marks on Willie's wrist. Is this the new crazy, to suck blood from the wrist of men? God forbid if a gay vibe comes across between Willie and the vampire. Willie returns to the cemetery that is 5 miles away from Collinwood. Again, 5 miles. Does he have a car? Does he walk? How long does it take to walk 5 miles? The world may never know, but however he got there, Jason followed him as Willie sneaks back to the crypt with the sound of the heartbeat drumming in his ear. We do know that the heartbeat is steady and there are no nerves coming from that body. Later, Barnabas asks permission to Roger and Elizabeth to take over the old house. Roger tells him to take it whilst an odd camera angle briefly shows Elizabeth looking like she is thinking about what she is going to have for dinner. Camera looks at Roger, looking pleased with himself, or is he thinking of a dirty joke before Elizabeth states that she needs to think about it? The next morning, Willie can't get out of bed after being out all night, and they finally call the doctor after thinking that he is faking. Dr. David Woodard appears and states that Willie has a loss of blood, causing him to be weak and lethargic. Elizabeth still wants to kick him to the curb, while everybody's hearts start to bleed, decide maybe Willie can stay in bed for one more day. Will Willie ever leave Collinwood? What is this new wrist-biting craze that has taken over at Collinwood? Will Jason's hold over Elizabeth keep her dangling in his web? Will Carolyn ever know what secret is going on between Jason and Elizabeth? Will Mrs. Johnson ever be seen with a Hoover, and who does keep lighting these fires? Will Roger even get a look in, as he seems to be out in the town again? All these questions and more may or may not be answered in our next Collinwood Bulletin, brought to you by Always Burn, the fireplace that never goes out. And this is Vicki Ray, and see you next time with all the news from Collinwood, Maine.
So this brings us to Morning Has Broken, or maybe not. I guess this brings us Shedding Some Light. Sorry, folks.
I need a cigarette after reading all that.
We're going to be discussing what we found in Dark Shadows and how we found these episodes. Starting with you, Tom. What did you think of these episodes of 201 to 219?
Okay, well, first of all, I need to give Timothy Gordon his due. He was the one I described as playing all the hands. Well, he actually didn't. He actually also played a character on Dark Shadows later on, but we are going to get to that when we get to that. But just so the veteran fans don't start to breathe down my throat, because he is noted for that as well. The episodes obviously are seminal in that. You really see the change when Jonathan comes on. He exudes the elegance. I mean, Liz is impressed. Roger is. I think he's fascinating.
I know, Jesus. If Roger likes him, it's like, holy shit. Roger likes anybody.
He likes him. He likes him.
He sees dollar signs in investment. That's
right, because he knows Barnabas.
Thinking about.
Well, even Roger says, well, he's got a lot of money. That kind of thing. Now, it's very, very well known that Jonathan was very nervous about being in a soap opera to this particular extent. It was hard for him to learn his lines. But
I mean, if he was a thespian, why was he having such a hard time with his lines if he was used to memorizing lines?
But another thing is, if you're doing plays, that's a bit different, because if you're doing plays, you normally have about 2 months of rehearsal, and then you do the one script every single night. Eight performances a week normally. To get like a different script every single day that has to be memorized the night before, and then spit all that out. So,
well, but there's another side to this that was actually brought out for the first time in the recent MPI biography of Dan Curtis, and it turns out that and it's kind of unsubstantiated, but that Jonathan may have been dyslexic. And he never wanted to he never wanted to go through the testing for the dyslexia.
Nobody ever does. I have one of my sons that had that, and it was just so you can tell really, really smart, but God, does he have a hard time sometimes, but
Exactly.
But now they figure out how to actually deal with it in their own brain.
And I have to tell you something from my personal reminiscences of Jonathan. He could talk about anything. He was a hell of a conversationalist. You could just bring up any subject to him, and he would have almost encyclopedic knowledge about it. I remember talking to him in detail about the Dion quintuplets, and he was, of course, a boy when it happened, but he was able to give me such rich dialogue. It was just such a pleasure. He was a very intelligent man. I've seen
some of his interviews. He was so totally different off camera than he was as Barnabas. I mean, total opposite.
Yes, very quiet.
Like a very warm and welcoming soul.
Very quiet, but he was welcoming. But we'll get into that in another time, because everybody
not so welcoming.
He sometimes, and this is my own personal opinion, sometimes you had to walk on eggshells with him. You didn't want to say the wrong thing.
Actors.
He was, he could take offense. He could take offense very
I've
easily.
been there with them. I know what they're like.
And so, he was, but if you got that, but if you got around that, he was a very generous man. And he was very grateful in later years for the fans and for keeping the memory alive. And I think he came to terms with that. That is, of course, another story. But getting back to this particular block, they give Rogers some great lines. In episode 204, he says, we ought to put a revolving door for Jason's guests. Talking to Willie. And when Willie says to him, we're going to get along fine. I think we're going to be all right, Roger. And he says, I may not have time to make that monumental discovery. So that's pure.
That's the one thing that I have I love the Barnabas character, but boy, when he comes on, he just sucks all the oxygen out of the other characters. He just does, and I don't think he did it on purpose. He didn't.
It was not
the
him,
writers
it was the writers. It was writers and the producers, but
I mean,
had to there say
Louis
though,
Edmonds goes by the wayside. They all do, and it's just like, no, keep them all going.
I mean, what's quite interesting in these blocks, though, I have to admit, is that they're closing up storylines. So obviously, you can tell that they got big dreams and big aspirations. That's this storyline that's coming, and of course, at this point, if you're new to Dark Shadows, you're at the same level that we are as we're watching these. You're in for a lot of surprises. But I guess it's quite good that we now hung up this whole 10 years ago driving incident.
Thank God.
To be honest.
Yep.
And so that's, even though it kind of like, and this is where there's a slight problem, okay? Sam and Burke sit there and confront Roger. It all comes out, and then nothing. No retribution, nothing.
No.
He's like, okay.
He just wants Roger to confess. That's
all he wanted. I thought he was going to
keep
keep up with the destruction of Collinwood, but
and you just think that if Roger, on the first episode, Roger goes, okay, Burke, I did it. Burke would have not had any storyline for the last 2 episodes.
I know.
Well, because he was so afraid that, and for a while, I think Burke did want to get him in, but I think Burke has evolved to a certain extent. And,
but I also have to sit there and say, but there's some kind of weird things that went on. Like the same thing, like Sam's looking for these paintings. This is going to make his career. Then Burke, Roger, admits finally what happened that frightful night. I guess they can't do much considering his wife just got burned up on the fishing shack a week prior to that. Yep. But there's like, what about these paintings? It's like, and Sam's okay. He's like, okay, fine, my career. I don't care. I guess, now that he's confessed, I guess I won't become famous from these paintings I did 10 years. Because they always let that storyline just drop. It's just like,
they wanted to get rid of it.
Be brought up.
They wanted to get rid of it.
But it would have been nice. It's like, they go, just all they had to do is say a line. They like, the paintings were destroyed, or Laura had the paintings in the fishing shed, or whatever. Just say something.
Yeah, they did.
You know what I mean?
There was no closure with that.
There's no closure, and it's quite sad. I mean, but at least we can now get past this. The whole driving incident that happened 10 years ago with Laura, Burke, and Roger.
Time to move on.
The only bad thing is, now is that Roger doesn't have a storyline. So it'll be interesting to see what they're going to do with his storyline. Though we do have Elizabeth's storyline that's
and that's going to continue.
Underneath.
And that's going to be, and that's taking on now the predominant whodunit, the mystery of what's in the locked room in the basement. But one thing about Burke is that so he substitutes one thing for another, and now all of a sudden Burke is the protector of the Collinwood women. In going
Burke
after
wants
Willie.
to get in everybody's pants.
Yeah.
He's
the swab me too, and Willie's the skanky me too.
Now he's running after Willie, and he says, "I'm going to beat you up, Willie, if you got it coming to you." Notwithstanding the fact that he could be thrown in jail over the assault. And where is Sheriff Patterson while this is going on? He's too busy working up the thing with the cattle.
The weird thing about it is that with I'm going to call him Jimmy Hall's Willie. I'm going to call him the Me Too Willie, and then I'm going to call John Carlin's the Frightened Willie because they've got two different personalities.
They are different. They are.
And the Me Too Willie is kind of bizarre because the way he treats women and stuff. And I don't know if this. I guess this. We're looking at this through a 2020 lens now, and of course, we've been Weinstein and everything else has popped up in the last couple of years.
Right.
But looking at it from a popular lens, it's kind of like the girls kind of just take it. Okay, they kind of say something, go and feel uncomfortable and stuff like this, but they kind of take it, and it's kind of weird that there's no really retribution for this kind of behavior, because even Burke's a bit lecherous at times. It's like, but it's just kind of weird kind of seeing this from a 2020 vein. But I'm not saying anything wrong with this series whatsoever. I love the Me Too Willie because I love the danger of that.
He is a dirty Willie, though.
Just something
much more dirty boy than
just rough about
Carlin.
him. Yeah, and I did quite like that. It's just this weird switch that we just got something. We do get new Willie does come in, or the Frightened Willie does come in. All of a sudden, we get a 180 switch from all the characters when the new Willie comes in. It's like, and the only one that seems to hold her composure about Willie seems to be Elizabeth, even though Willie never actually did anything to Elizabeth. The women that Me Too Willie accosted seemed to have like, oh well, he's sick, maybe he should stay another day. And meanwhile, the one he didn't do anything to at all, except tried to give some kind of respect to him, like a Willie kind of respect, was to Elizabeth, and she's the one that wants him out. So I thought that was a bit odd with the writing here, that we just get this 180 with the new Willie and a new personality with the new Willie.
Well, he was more endearing. I mean, Carlin is an endearing person,
Well, I think this Willie's written quite endearingly as well. I mean, to be honest, because you got to remember that we were endeared to John Carlin's Willie because all of us here have seen where this series goes to.
Right.
These episodes here are either a second or third time viewing for us, so we know where but if you got to remember, if you're coming in this cold and you never seen this, we don't know that Willie's endearing yet. We get Frightened Willie, so we don't know if he's the endearing character that we're going to love later.
But they do give you. There was an interesting line, and I don't remember whether it was Vicky or Carolyn. I think it was Carolyn when she was describing. She goes, "One thing about Willie, he'll be talking, and if you look at him, you can see what he's thinking." Even though he's talking about something, he's thinking about something underneath that may have nothing to do with what he's talking about. It gives you that, but I don't think that's something that the first Willie could ever have done through that particular betrayal. You look at the first Willie, and you know what he is. He's a lech. He's but you look at John Carlin's Willie, and then there's another layer underneath, and I think that was what the writers.
He's the tortured Willie, I like to call him, because he's just tortured throughout all this Barnabas stuff. So,
but I have to sit there and say that even the lines that tortured Willie says, if you listen to the lines, if you go back and view the two Willies, that's in this segment, and listen to the lines that they're given, they're written totally different as well. I mean, it's just like,
great.
Which is quite interesting. I mean, I do love the Me Too Willie. I think Jimmy Hall did a fantastic job. Yeah. I don't think that he could have done I don't think he could have done the tortured Willie very well. But at the same time, I don't think tortured Willie could have done the Me Too Willie very well.
Well, again, it was the writing. They wrote one way for Jimmy Hall. Then I think they decided to go another way, and they realized and they felt for whatever reason that Jimmy Hall couldn't do that, make that transition.
But I will say that the Jason McGuire and Me Too Willie have a better chemistry than the tortured Willie and Jason McGuire character.
You do pick that up, and also you do see in this block the empathy that Jason holds for Willie once he realizes he's sick. Yeah. Then all of a sudden he completely changes. At one point he said, "I got to get this guy out of here because he's ruining my chance to get Liz's money." But then once Willie comes back to the Blue Whale days later, and the first episode, they didn't do enough makeup on John Carlin. He just looks like kind of pale and wan, but he looks normal. But then somebody must have realized, because the next episode, they really made him look haggard and gaunt. And I mean, he looked like
bloodless.
He really, what?
Well, he did just lose about 7 points of blood.
Well, no, I think
there is mad hickey on his wrist.
I think the human body can only hold 5, Keith. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think
the
so
non-male vibe thing going on in his wrist, not on his neck. So.
But he sure lost a lot of blood, and he looked it. But the point is that Jason is completely changes, and now Jason fights with Liz to keep him there, and at least until he gets well. And of course, there's a whole big thing that nobody believes Willie's sick. Roger, as usual, is the worst of those. You never believe.
Maybe I like Roger so much because he reminds me of Keith. Maybe that's why I like it.
Oh, and there's another blooper when Roger is trying to get Willie out of bed to get him out, and Willie is moaning and groaning, and he claps and goes, "Bravo, bravo!
Yeah.
What a performance, Sarah La Bernhardt." He says Sarah La Bernhardt instead of Sarah Bernhardt, and Sarah La, just like another Jewish guy. This is Sarah La Bernhardt. No, but seriously, it is, and Burke is absolutely floored. Burke wanted to beat the hell out of him. He was going to make an example of Willie, and he wanted to beat the hell out. Time for another lesson, And he goes in there, and then he is absolutely floored by the way Willie looks, and even he is shocked. And even he says, "Well, you know something? Maybe he should go." Burke is saying he should go to a hospital. And which would be the normal response that you would expect of the modern equivalent is take him to the ER.
Do you think that there was when Barnabas comes on the scene and he has the conversation, and I think this might be a blooper, I'm not sure, but he has the conversation that he wants to take over the old house.
Yes.
And Roger's there. And for a brief moment, the camera snaps to Elizabeth, and it's almost like she's not there. And then it snaps back to Roger, and Roger's got like this weird look. And then it seems like it's almost like the camera did this weird cut that didn't meant to do. They like because she did look like she's thinking about what am I gonna have for dinner tonight? Let me go through the scene. And she's kind of like sitting there, and you can see her like thinking, and it's also like
they do that often enough though, because I'm in in the 300s, mid 300s right now. And there's times where there's just absolutely no focus.
That's right. That's right.
So,
but this one did feel like it was like this weird cut, and you're kind of thinking, oh, maybe they weren't supposed. Maybe she wasn't supposed to be in this. The shot of her wasn't supposed to be there. She had no lines to say.
I do want to mention switching to. There's a very marvelous soliloquy by Barnabas when he's with Vicky in the old house, and he talks about how the old house was built. The bricks were imported from England. The walls were imported from Spain. That kind of thing. He wants to. They want to give this impression that it's both old world and new, and how charming the old world is. In fact, the family is shocked when they hear he wants to move into the old house. They're like,
no electricity.
They can't.
And he never does replace the wallpaper.
He did replace but he did replace the windows.
That's right.
There's no wallpaper, but we got windows.
That's right. I think he has a wallpaper taken down.
I tell you what, Willie cleans the house better than Mrs. Johnson.
Willie can do it all.
That's going to come later. That's not in this block.
The next time, once Barnabas moves in, the cobwebs are gone.
It's great. I mean, Willie. They should have hired Willie rather than Mrs. Johnson. I think.
I like Mrs. Johnson. Get off of Miss Johnson.
He might even be there.
Willie did a hell of a job cleaning that front room up. You're like, God.
Probably would have been a better cook too, because remember what Jason said about Mrs. Johnson? She burns the food.
Yeah, that's what Roger says too. He goes, he says the food basically sucks, but they eat it because they're scared of her.
Well, you know what's scarier than Mrs. Johnson cooking for yourself.
Yeah,
that's funny.
I know, but I mean,
it's a very famous speech.
There is a flip during this season though. There's kind of like you're kind of going along, and then poof, it's like there's 180 with everyone. You're kind of like, whoa, what happened here? It's almost like you felt there's points where you feel like you missed like two or three weeks of episodes somewhere because like all the character changes that happen.
They do. I mean, it is kind of confounding a little bit, but you catch up.
But I do want to praise Jonathan for that speech. Because that speech actually was used again when they did the 91 remake of Dark Shadows with Ben Cross. Yep. And it's the exact same speech. I think they might have added a little to it, but basically, and I think Marmerstein wrote that. Malcolm Armenstein did a few of these episodes. Ron Sproat did the majority of them. But that particular speech just really gave Jonathan this chance to emote the sadness of the Barnabas character, and it's obviously we're just introduced to him. It's the first time we realize that he is not the Lugosi vampire.
Yeah.
They didn't want to make him like this is somebody with baggage, baggage which anybody can sympathize with, empathize with, in fact. And
until you get in a later episode when he just starts pissing you right smooth off. That's where I am right now.
And I told you that. I told you before. That's going to pass.
I know. I don't remember. It's been years.
And remember also, originally he was only going to be on for a couple of weeks.
Then they're
going to stake him off. So I think they had no idea what was going to happen. So
I wonder what would have happened had they killed him off. What would have gone on? What would have happened with Dark Shadows?
Another monster.
I don't think we'd be here talking about it.
That's what I'm wondering.
Or we might have got another monster of the week. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. And again,
the Frankenstein storyline could have taken off.
I said the story. But I
can't wait to get to that one.
But the story was Jonathan had accepted a position in teaching in California, and he was walking out the door when the audition call came on the phone, and he said, "Well, maybe I better pick that up before I leave," and that was so fateful. If it hadn't been for that, no, they would have had Bert Convy on as Barnabas instead, or one of those other. And I don't think anyone would have made such a difference.
Impact.
His Shakespearean training, I believe, gave him the ability to emote in a very compelling and charming way, and the women were fascinated with him. Roger was very intrigued. And
wonder which side Roger's bread is butter gone.
I think Laura was his beard.
To
be honest, he's not interested in any other women. He's not Roger. You never see him interested. Even when they see Laura, he's kind of like, okay, well, here comes my beard. There's like no romance or any kind of spark line between Roger and Laura, and then and there hasn't been any females that who ever walked. I mean, Victoria is an attractive woman, even when she walks in, it's like, okay.
Well,
he did try to schmooze her a little bit in the beginning.
With Jonathan, with Barnabas, that's going to change later on, and we don't want to get into that. But Barnabas is going to become quite fond of Victoria as he gets to know her, and and even there, he's got the old world charm, kisses her hand, and they're all like...
All the men in this show are old perverts going after young girls.
Well, I had to sit there and say that so far, up to like 219, they do need to get some young blood guys coming in at some point.
Besides Joe.
But that's a couple of years later.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but at the moment, what we got basically is, we got middle-aged men, young, virginal women, and outside of Joe, who's
outside of Liz. Liz is no longer virginal or young.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about like the young girls. That's all we got. We got the three young girls. We got Mrs. Johnson, who basically is so asexual that basically even a priest or nun are more attractive than she is.
Carol,
then we got Elizabeth, but she's a matriarch, so she's untouchable. And then you got the lecherous men outside of Roger, who's asexual. So it's just kind of this weird mix of these people. I'm thinking, how the hell do these people like breed?
I know.
But it is kind of an odd thing. So I mean, I do know that in later years, as we keep going and going, series. I mean, we're only in the first year of Dark Shadows anyway. Right. I know that this series runs to 1971, and we do start getting young bloods through. But you do think that, as far as the dating aspect goes in Collinsport at this point in time, there's not a lot of options out there. So,
well,
you go to the Blue Whale. There isn't even a piece of strange to pick up in that bar.
Well, all those men probably smell of fish anyway. So.
Whoa.
They're all fishermen, aren't they?
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. But Liz kind of hints at it when she says, "Is there anybody in your life, Barnabas?" And he says, "He says no, not right now, but do you hope to have one?" You know,
Yep.
Liz is thrilled because she makes the speech about he is everything a Collins should be. He's
Yeah.
courtly. He's elegant. He's
Worldly.
you know, in other words, he's an asset to the family. And this is the PR, the optics that she
But they
wants to
don't
project.
ever wonder where no one ever decides to research the man, though. They just say, "Oh, cousin Barnabas, just because you look like this guy in the portrait, we're going to take it at face value."
Well, it is before Google.
It is before Google, yeah.
Nowadays, they'd be like, "Oh, who's this thing? Oh, we're going to Google him."
I wonder why Burke never
What's
decided
your
to
Facebook
investigate
profile?
him. I don't think Burke ever investigates him, and I think that would have been
Yeah,
a
he
perfect-
does later down the road.
Oh, maybe he does. Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, at this point, I mean, let's be honest. The only people that Barnabas is meeting is the Collinses.
Family.
Anyway. He hasn't met anyone so far outside the Collins.
We don't have two roosters in the hen house quite yet.
Yeah, but I mean, but we do get some. You know, I think this is where this Barnabas is quite good. I think this is where the Shakespearean comes up because we do get that. You know.
Right.
And that Shakespearean is epitomized by a line that they give David, I think. David, by the way, when he meets Barnabas in the old house, first thinks that he's the actual ghost of the Barnabas in the portrait. So he's, oh, great, I got another cousin. But David's line is when they ask him what they think of him, he says that he's sad, like he's remembering something he lost a long time ago. Quite an introspect. I mean, I knew the kid was smart, but I mean, yes, I could see him saying that he's sad, but to say that he's remembering something he lost a long time ago, that's kind of hard to swallow. That they were able actually to get, but obviously the writers were conveying a message, and it would be seen in Jonathan's performance that in actuality that's exactly what was occurring.
Well, this is
it's
the
a good way
first
to
vampire you ever see that has regret, you know?
Yeah, but
First
it's also a good way to flesh out the character as well. You know what I mean? Because, you know, if you think of the character of Barnabas, it's kind of an odd thing from what we know up to 219 without going past these episodes. I mean, we got a man who's basically just come back from whatever time period he's come from. And he's gone to the house that he grew up in, which is like a decay. And, you know,
right.
And so, and what we do know is that, you know, the Collinswood house that they're currently living in has been going for what? They've been standing in it for over 150 years, maybe up to almost 200. That we know
old
of.
One or the new house?
The new house, from what we know. So basically,
it's over like 140.
So how long was this house? How long was this house vacant for? Before, you know, vacant that time period. So you know, I guess imagine that, you know, you come back from another time and you go to the house that you grew up in. You're walking around and it's just
that's why
dead that you know.
Well,
so
that's why you have all those poignant scenes, and especially the one where he says, you know, that the chains that bound me, Father, are now broken, and that takes on a lot of significance. But
Father, I am home.
Father, I am home, and I've come to stay, and I'm here to have the life that I never had. And once again, that's going to be
wreaking havoc in everybody else's.
But that's going to be contradicted later on because it was his own choice. You're going to see that it was his. Well, you know, I'm not going to get into it.
Yeah, we know.
I do have to admit, though, as far as the writers of Dark
yet.
Shadows are concerned, is that they got these two storylines going over each other. You got the Jason McGuire storyline and the Paul Stoddard Elizabeth situation and what happened 20 years ago, that fateful night, and then we got the Barnabas story emerging, and it's kind of like they're kind of there's this kind of weird kind of struggle going on with the storylines. One you're interested in, and the other one you're before Barnabas shows up, you're kind of interested in because you're kind of like you really want to solve this mystery, you really want to know where it's going. But now that Barnabas is coming, and we notice that what Barnabas has been in 9 episodes so far, is it?
Right.
So we see 9 episodes.
Eight actually, since
8 episodes of Barnabas who comes in, and because it's such an interesting thing, and you don't know where at this point, you don't really know where this character is going or what's going to become of this character.
Right.
But which basically, unfortunately, suffers the Jason Elizabeth spiderweb story that's going on here, and it's kind of a weird kind of dichotomy, because the thing is that when it does go back to Jason like holding, with Elizabeth and the little taunting that's going on with, you kind of don't care that much. You don't care as much as like, well, let's get back to Barnabas. Let's figure what's this character about,
and everything related.
Kind of sad in a way,
and everything related to Barnabas. You can't forget the memorable scenes they gave. Daniel Keyes is the caretaker a lot in this block, and he talks about the history of Joshua and Naomi and the child Sarah, and Jason. There's a great line between Jason where the caretaker says to Jason, "Can't you feel anything in the air?" And Jason says, "I can't even feel the air because they're in." Because they're in a crypt, and it's all stuffy, So I mean, there was they gave Jason a little comedy, but you for the first time you hear about Joshua, you hear about Naomi, you hear about the child Sarah, and we're going to know a lot more about that later on. And of course, they all thought the original Barnabas went to England, and
nobody thought to check.
Nope, and that's the background story.
Well, to be honest, the only book they would have is that one that's written by themselves, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's exactly right. That's
so
exactly right.
Someone in the Collins family has like filled it out. So it's it's basically like you can rewrite any history you want in your own book. So
that's what happened. But what about newspapers during the time? And when I don't want to get into that, but yeah,
well, technically, isn't it during the Revolutionary War that when they made that secret room,
Yes,
but I don't understand this. Why do they build a new house?
They were moving out, and again, that's covered later on. I don't want to get into it. But
why is the old house still there? You think they would have torn it down and done something around? I guess.
Yeah. Well, they didn't want to tear it. But
I mean, it's cool having it in the series. But I'm talking about if this was reality. I'm talking about looking at it from a reality point of view. It's like why do I got this old house? And I had to sit there and say, I didn't realize Eagle Hill Cemetery was so far away. I always thought it was there. I thought it was there, like between the old house and the new house for some reason.
Yeah, but then when they're on the property, they can see Eagle Hill Cemetery from Collinwood.
Yeah.
So you're always wondering. Like, I'm not going to get into it. When somebody gets abducted, they decide to walk home with a ghost. It's like 5 miles. It's like,
well, think of that. The first time we get to Eagle Hill Cemetery is like Victoria and Frank are driving there. So it's kind of like,
yes.
Yeah. And by the way, I think Jason took the car out to the cemetery. Now that I recall, so I don't think.
So he followed him with his headlights on. Willie.
Something. Yeah. So
it
wasn't just a walk. It wasn't just a walk.
I thought that the old caretaker was at a different cemetery.
No, well, everything's at Eagle Hill at the moment. There's no other cemetery. It's just Eagle Hill.
Well, he was originally where he had his little house there near Laura's.
But isn't that Eagle Hill Cemetery as well?
Yes, he's the caretaker of all the cemeteries, so he's got a big job.
That was a different cemetery, though, wasn't it?
Where the house was? Yeah, it was a different cemetery.
I'm confused.
I believe
how many people have died in this town? How many people have died in this town of 200 people?
There's the Collinsport Cemetery. I remember Mrs. Johnson was talking about it. It's the Collinsport Cemetery, which is it was not too far south of Collinwood, where all the rest of the family is buried. And the only ones that wanted the mausoleum were Joshua and his immediate family, and that's over in Eagle Hill.
Well, they built that special.
And where is what's his name buried? Mrs. Johnson's, I forgot his name now. The one who got killed, got pushed off the cliff. Where's he buried? No, not Mrs. Johnson, who she used to work for.
Oh God, isn't that terrible?
Bill Malloy.
Bill Malloy. Where's he buried? Because she said something about where he's buried.
I'll bet they cremated him.
Because Mrs. Johnson at one point, I'm not sure if it was in this block or the block previously, but she said something about Bill Malloy. Oh no, he wasn't good enough to be buried with the Collins. He's buried at blah. So I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
Well, they did that about Laura, or was that they did that about Josette and about Radcliffe, Laura Radcliffe. She wasn't good enough to be buried. They always say that only the Collinses and the
Right.
Stockbridges could have a special place to be buried.
Yeah,
So.
But the Stockbridges were buried in that other area, which had nothing to do with where Joshua and Naomi and Sarah were buried.
I mean, it's quite interesting reviewing these series because, as I said before, I've gone past these episodes and previous viewings of this, and I always, for some reason, thought that the cemetery was on the property of Collinswood.
I assume that.
And now rewatching these, you actually realize, well, actually, there's a lot of bit of difference, in where they are when they talk about miles and where they are, and it's kind of interesting that when you review these and start picking up more information, it's quite interesting.
And and it goes into the line where Jason says, "Who's there?" and the caretaker says, "Only the dead." And it is
I can tell you that it takes about an hour and 20 to do 5K because I did it last week with my dog. I walked, of course. So it was like an hour and 20 minutes to do 3 miles.
Well, I always wonder how far away is the old house from the new house. I always kind of wonder where
5 minutes, they said. It was like a 5-minute walk.
So that means that basically when you're in the old house, when you're in the new house, you can look out the window and look at the old house like
spitting distance.
Okay.
That's funny. By the way, do you notice that when Barnabas, that terrible derby hat that he wears, if you can call it a derby hat, they got rid of that very fast.
Well, they had to make room for his comb over, his brill cream comb over in the front.
And that's the other thing I was going to mention. No bat bangs at this point. No
bangs.
No little curly, whatever you call them, that look like the wings of a bat on his hair. At this point, he's got a regular short haircut. I guess
talking about people's appearance. Can we talk about Elizabeth's daughter and a stupid head bow?
Just let him.
She's got these great big bows. But did you see the one dress that she's wearing? Okay, do you know what a
I don't
what they call? You know what a minstrel? Not a minstrel singer. What they're called? They're Victorian. They had and over
Bustle?
Here they're. No, and do you remember Mary Poppins? You know when they're singing Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and you know that sparkly, that black with the sparkly things that they put on the dresses, and I forgot what they call them. They call in Britain they're here and they're really annoying and people dress them up. And anyway, we got Elizabeth in one of those kind of dresses. Like, what is she wearing? You know, where she's like wearing this black dress and has like all these silver triangles all over it. And it looks like she's about to do like, it's not a minstrel show, but a show like that. And you're like, what in the hell is she dressed like that for? And you do sometimes look at Elizabeth and sometimes she like opens the door in an evening gown. You're like, where the hell are you going? You haven't left the property yet forever. It's kind of weird seeing, and I love the way that she's dressing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking, anything away.
Orbox takes really good care of her.
Well, there are sometimes there's some outfits you just think, oh.
It was the 60s, though. I mean, when you start watching the color ones and you see the color, the greens and the oranges and the yellows, Well,
I had a conversation on Facebook of the reason why the colors in television, the reason why they're become quite garish, is because I think what was happening is when color television was coming in, they wanted to show off color.
Right.
And so all the TV shows basically overdosed everyone on color precisely. And I think that's pretty much what we got. But I have to say that some of the Elizabeth's dresses, you just think, okay. It's almost like she's come off of a set from Airport, one of those airport movies, and she's like Elizabeth de Havilland, like in Towering Inferno or something. But she's wearing a lot of these kind of outfits. You're kind of going, oh, it'd be nice if they kind of dressed her down a little bit, made her a bit more lady of the manor instead of lady of the Hollywood circle sometimes. And the hair bows are driving me up the wall. It's like she got like a really good Christmas present and there's a bow on it and she decided to put it on her head. I don't know.
Well, those were quite stylish back then, the yarn bows and any bow.
But is it to hide
the 80s?
But is that to hide the fall, the fake hair?
Yeah. It's to hold it in too. I mean,
okay. So that makes sense.
But I mean, basically what you got with these episodes is, you got your new storyline with, the crazy Irishman there. He drives me nuts. Jason just drives me crazy.
What do you have against Jason? I love
He
him.
drives me crazy. He just does.
Willie. Oh, you're going to see a lot
I
more.
kind of wish that the only thing I wish they'd done with Jason McGuire's character a bit more. I don't mind him being kind of sleazy and smarmy with Elizabeth's character, but I kind of wish he was. I kind of wished he would do a 360 or 180 with all the other characters, like be this really nice, polite house guest who's fantastic, and when he's alone with Elizabeth, the switch. Like, you know what I mean? Like a switch of things. So he had this, like, these two, like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality.
Well, because he knows now he can get away with it.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have more of that change of personality. So when he's with everyone else, he's this, and then when Elizabeth is going like, get out of my house, and that would have been nice if everyone else go, what's wrong with him? He's fine.
Well, they may have made a conscious decision, the writers, to just have him more as someone who had this outward charm, but we really knew what he was underneath.
Yeah,
and that was the villain you love to hate. And I think they were trying to emulate that. Certainly, they did that with Barnabas. Barnabas was the vampire you loved to hate.
Yeah, but Jason, there's no danger about Jason. The only danger with Jason is, Elizabeth, whatever happened those many years ago, the only person basically in danger is Elizabeth, and she might have to leave the house for a number of years depending on what's going on. So, but you know what I mean? So it'd be nice if there's like more of a dangerousness about that. He could do something that could basically...
He really is kind of
weak.
the
family apart, and he's dangerous to everyone, but there's not that danger with him. He's kind of like... And against Barnabas, Barnabas has this... he's emanating this danger that you don't quite know. He's this dark stranger who's appeared, which kind of taken Jason's dark stranger and kind of made him a bit jokey now. You know what I mean? He pales in comparison.
And again, there's the development of the double entendre in this block of episodes with Barnabas, that you had a little of that with Laura. That's why I kind of called her the precursor in the beginning. But when he says, I've had a long and difficult journey from one world to another. And, and so you immediately get the sense that, what the hell is he talking about, But then you realize what he's talking about, and he's actually giving away clues about himself. But it's clues, and the family doesn't know what the hell he's talking about at all. But we pick it up, and it's really meant for us, the viewer, to see what's going on. And the development, in my view, of the double entendre with the Barnabas character was really one of the things that made the show a hit, because you always knew that there was another level of meaning underneath what they were saying. When they talked about Willie, again, when he's talking, you can see he's thinking about something else. And that kind of points to that as well. But it isn't as well developed in Willie as it is. It's right there in Barnabas, and you can be instantly mesmerized to it.
I mean, I guess this series of episodes actually feels like an ending but with a new beginning. That's what I guess.
Exactly.
That's what these episodes.
Out with the old, in with the new.
And I said, there does feel like there's a weird break that happens. That all of a sudden it's like, it's almost like they fired a bunch of writers and got a bunch of brand new ones, and the brand ones new without anyone training the other person. So I thought that though we have a lot of interesting things going on in this block, there is. And we do get the introduction of Barnabas, which is interesting. But there is this kind of disconnect between, the first 10 episodes and then what happens after these 10 episodes for this block. So,
well, I was going to say also, and I started to say this before, that because Jonathan was so nervous, and he would say that himself, he was so nervous in terms of trying to remember the lines and come across, that actually fed into the character of Barnabas's neurosis. So it was an accident, because Fred was obviously very nervous, but the way he portrayed Barnabas was nervous too. And so it really gave a reality to the character, that an accidental reality, but one to the character that the fans would not have guessed otherwise. And Jonathan, from what I understand, was the most surprised of all that the character took off the way it did. It was a job to him. He figured it'll be over in 2 weeks, and he'll take his teaching job at school. And the rest is history. So that's a very important thing to remember.
And then the rest is
So I guess
episodes down the line.
so I guess this brings us to our morning has broken on part of the podcast, where we're going to discuss what we like the best, what we like the least, who our favorite character was for this segment, and who our least favorite character was for this segment. So, Vicky, what did you like the best about these episodes?
Well, the best I liked about the episode is how they're tying up the old stuff. Trying to get one storyline going, and then starting with the Barnabas story. Because let's face it, everybody just couldn't wait for Barnabas. Anybody who's anybody knows who Barnabas Collin is, And as far as the character, I least like. God, I mean, he's a great actor. Jason, whoever with Jason McGuire, his name's
Dennis Patrick.
Patrick, yeah. I mean, he definitely plays the role, because in soap operas, like. Even one of the ones I watch now, I mean, if you hate somebody, they're doing their job well. That's the way I look at it. It's got to be good, because just like, oh my God, he's irritating the shit out of me. And the lead, I don't know, who I didn't seem to come across really strong in the stories was probably Elizabeth. I don't know what was going on with Liz, but I guess she was getting blackmailed. I guess that would put
exactly.
a wet damper on anybody's activities. But and then there's Burke Devlin, who always, I mean, him and Louis Edmonds get so emasculated in these episodes that they just kind of go the wayside. Not that I don't like Barnabas, but that he does kind of take up all the oxygen in the room, and all these other characters are kind of okay. So what do we do with them? And you still love these guys, and they're endearing, and you want to see where their episodes are, where they're evolving, in their journey on this show. But I mean, all in all, it gets interesting from here. I won't deny.
And what about yourself, Tom? What did you like best about these episodes? What do you like least about these episodes? Who is your favorite character from these episodes, and who is your least favorite character from these episodes?
Well, for the favorite character, I'm gonna obviously it's gonna be a tie for me. It's gonna be Jonathan, and I don't want to say that he was the best one all the time, because that could be a cop out to say that he's always going to be the best one from now on. But Jonathan as Barnabas obviously just lifts it to another level. The other one I would say would be John Carlin.
You have to say John Carlin. Yeah. I mean, you just can't limit it to one. He definitely brings a totally different nuance to these episodes.
Absolutely. And the worst one I'm going to say is Richard Woods as Dr. Woodard. And the reason I'm saying that is because, of course, I'm thinking ahead. The next actor that plays Dr. Woodard,
he's so much stronger. He really is.
Robert Geringer. And Robert Geringer, of course, we're going to go into, but he was more like the caring Dr. Kildare of Dark Shadows, and a very human doctor, and someone that really cared. And it just now Richard Woods is a stuffy medical shirt. He could have played Roger very easily in the way his and I think that's why he didn't last. They didn't like the way that Richard Woods was playing Woodard, as if to as
he isn't near as endearing as the next one. I think when you get ahead, and I think when you get ahead like we do, sometimes we kind of think, oh well, we got to start comparing apples and oranges, because he's my favorite doctor throughout all of them.
So those are my favorites. And
what about as far as storylines goes? And worst part of this block and the
storylines. The Barnabas plot, because it's so quick to get the imagination.
It is.
Although the idea of him biting cows does not appeal to me.
But I do think the rest of it kind of takes off and it's romanticized, don't you think? Like a Gothic novel.
It is. It is exactly that. It's Gothic horror now at this point, and the idea of and that's the traditional vampire that can enchant women just by talking to them, and they just is captivated, and we are captivated by Barnabas. We're captivated by his mannerisms. We're captivated by his control, his seeming control of the situation.
Right.
Where in fact he's really out of control, and we see that later on.
A little bit.
Yeah, but what a great act that he puts on with the fans. So the Barnabas plot to me is the best, and the worst is that with the whodunit, they're going to drag it out.
They did drag it out a little much to my liking, but there was a reason for it. They had to finish it.
That's right. They are going to drag it out, and it is so slow. You can see that the Liz thing with the body is the remnant of what things were like before the Barnabas plot came along, and they got to finish that, but they want to milk it for whatever it's worth because they've already ended the accident with Roger. They've already ended that. That's done. That's closed. So now they gotta finish up this thing too, and but it's slow compared to so that part I don't like about this block.
I agree.
Yeah.
For me, the best part I like about this, I think that the introduction of Barnabas and the lead up to that, I think was ingeniously done. I think it was really well filmed, and I like the whole structure of how they did that. The least part, I have to say, I didn't like this 180 change. I didn't like any of the follow through that went through. There's, they closed down storylines, but there's no follow through with these characters. Like, follow it, okay, let's forget about this. Let's forget about these people even existed. And I found that a little bit disconcerting. I would have liked a little bit more of interaction, just a little bit more, just kind of bleed your storylines together. Just keep, you know what I mean? And have them flow. Don't just have them hit against the rock and then, okay, here comes another wave. You want an ebb and flow going on here. And it just seems a big...
Don't you think they were making it up as they went along, kind of, just because this was a whole different kind of thing?
But the thing is like, no, I do think that basically they decided, okay, I think that they realized that Raging Streak was coming up. They had to get this out quickly or they're going to be canceled, and that's what it felt like.
That's right. Yep.
And it did have that feel through. And I know that these episodes were never meant to be seen again. You're supposed to see this once, and you were never supposed to see this ever again. So that's the reason why we have some of the stuff that goes on.
Right.
But reviewing this, it would have been quite nice because, to be honest, I do like the Roger. I did like the Sam, and I like the
I love Sam.
I love Burke, and I like the way that we have these things going off, and just to have it, Roger admitting to what he did, and then
that's it.
Okay, well, that's fine then. And I'm sorry, but it's like you just spent like a whole year building all this up, and now these competitors like, okay, everyone's fine with it.
You're waiting for the crushing blow for Burke.
And Burke's gone to prison. It's like, okay, well, I'm fine now that you said so. Okay, let's get on. It's kind of like, so the basically they don't know what they're going to do with Burke. Yeah, we don't know what they do with Burke. There's nothing to do with Sam, and there's nothing to do with him. And so it's just kind of sad. I just think I kind of wish there was a bit more follow through, or just to have some more angst going on with these characters. But now it looks like they're all going to ride off into the sunset together because now they're all friends. So that kind of bothered me.
I was going to mention though that it did give that scene in which Roger has to confess did give Louis Edmonds a great chance, and he did it so well.
Oh yeah,
he did. That was a great scene.
You saw it in his face. You saw it the way his lip was quivering. He was caught dead to rights. He tried lying. He tried everything he could to get out of it, blaming Sam and blaming the world. But the bottom line was he was finally caught, and when he realized that that Burke didn't really want the police called. Liz was actually going to call the police. Mm-hmm. Roger was going to do something nasty in his pants when Liz told him, "I'm going to call the cops." "No, Liz, you can't do that." And he was almost like whining like a baby. And then Liz picks up the phone and Bert puts it down.
Liz does that a lot with everybody. "I'm just calling the police," and she never does. She picks up the phone and she's ready to do it, but.
I mean, I guess it's just because, we've had 200 episodes leading up to this. The show's almost a year old.
Right.
When we next episode will basically be when Dark Shadows is a year, when we do the next episode. It's actually become its year anniversary. And so I guess, I just imagine like 10 months of the storyline, and it should have had this. And I think that scene was fantastically played. Nothing against that scene. I think that was the best thing. But you just didn't you spent 10 months of the storyline to finally coming out to fruition, and it kind of hit, and you're kind of going, oh, okay. And I guess that's what I was slightly disappointed with. I kind of wanted something more, or at least, okay, now Bert's got this, Roger, now what can we do now that we know? And they could have done something with that, which we're not getting. So I guess it was just a bit of disappointment. As far as my best character, I'm going with Me Too Willie with Jimmy Hall. I still, every time I think of him, I need to have a shower. I just feel dirty.
Yeah, or a cigarette. He's a dirty boy, I will admit.
And I do know that as Carlin as Willie, to me, he hasn't grown into the role yet. I think I like him at the moment, but I think Me Too Willie, I don't think he can do what the new Willie has to do.
I agree.
But this Me Too Willie, I have said there, say I love that sleaziness. I love where they were going. I kind of wish that they might have given it more time to figure out what's going to happen here. And I kind of wish they didn't do the one, the
switcheroo,
switch like they did. I'm glad that they did a switch because it makes sense in future episodes when we get to them.
Right.
But at the moment, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like, what the hell happened here? And as I said before, it does feel like old writers were fired. They brought in these brand new writers. Like, we're just going to forget everything we did, and we're going to start new now. Poof, here we go.
But I do have to say that the same writers, Marmestein and Sproat, are doing the episodes. They didn't bring
but I'm saying, but it doesn't feel that way. I'm just saying.
But Sproat is doing more. That's because Sproat is writing more now than Marmestein. Marmestein has written less in these blocks, and I think what you're talking about, Keith, is that Ron Sproat's. Whereas in the beginning, Marmestein was practically the one writing all of them. So I just think that it might have been better if they sat there and they bled this through gradually instead of the 180 that they did. They did do a 180 with all of the characters. Mm-hmm. The only one that's probably consistent is Elizabeth. Right. She's the only one that's been consistent so far. And the caretaker. Well, yeah.
Nancy Barrett's pretty consistent still.
He'll never change.
Pretty consistent.
But she is a 180 as well. She got from being feeling like she's just been sexually molested by Willie to being like, oh, she didn't for him. But she wasn't really. Oh, but also Carolyn, she wasn't really sexually. He touched her hair. Well, no, yeah, but if you look at the scene before that, he didn't touch her, but he's pressing up against her, and he's like saying something. Oh yes. And I'm talking about, he might have not touched her, but emotionally and mentally. Definitely a violation. I agree with you. He's violating her. Yeah, I mean, that's as much as they could. And you have to take it in that what we're looking at daytime television. So this is as far as they could push that envelope, and they were pushing it quite far. That's right. Which I thought it was brilliant, but
I did.
But I love Jimmy Hall for being able to do that, because I have to say that this is the first time I actually felt danger in this program for me personally. Yeah. Well, I'm going to say, and just very briefly, that they actually did it. It was on another show. It was on General Hospital, which I was also watching at the time. And Tom Baldwin, the character of Tom Baldwin, raping Audrey. And
everybody wanted to bang Audrey.
That was a hell of a scene for the 60s, because they were married. She was in love with Steve, so she didn't want to go to bed with Tom. He didn't want to go to bed with Tom Baldwin, and he just got so frustrated, and it was pent up, and they were sleeping separately, and then finally he broke down the door, and then just started attacking her in bed. Remember that one? I don't know if you remember that one, Vicky.
I've seen the scenes, yeah.
I never forgot it.
Everybody wanted Audrey, and everybody wanted to bang Jesse. Yep.
That was another one. Yeah, Jesse and Phil. That was another one. But they really went almost all the way in that particular scene.
Almost.
And that was in the 80s.
And as I said before, it would have been nice if they went a bit more gradual with the changeover, not because it did feel like Friday, this is what you have. Monday, like, whoa, happened.
Yeah, it did switch really quickly.
Now, as far as my least favorite character, I'm going to go for Joe. I just think that he.
I think
he goes back and forth so much with Carolyn.
Well, yeah, but it's not the back and forth with Joe. Joe's boring. He's just boring.
Well, they haven't given him anything to do yet.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's no storyline for him. He can't even so far. Okay, I like the scenes where he has him and Maggie. They're very cute. I think that we probably get more chemistry between Maggie and Joe than we are getting with anyone else, any other couples that we're finding coming through this.
Well, they're the only young couple on the show.
But we get more chemistry with Joe and Carolyn than we do with Burke and Victoria, or Burke and Carolyn, or Joe and Carolyn, or Burke, or even Victoria and Frank. I mean, they got a great chemistry going on, and it does pay off. But Joe's just. They don't know what to do with him, and unfortunately, there's a lot of characters. They just are kind of they're kind of like day actors. They got to come in because they're on their contract. They have to go do their little bit of play and then get their paycheck and go. And Joe's a bit like that at the moment. I do know that later on, we get to actually see Joe's acting chops later on, so I know that that's coming. Sure. But at this point in time in these episodes, Joe's a bit influential, and Burke's a bit like outside of that, the finishing up of the storyline. They don't know what to do with him either. So.
Well, there is that scene, though, with Burke and Carolyn, where Burke, in the Blue Whale, where Burke apologizes to Carolyn, which is definitely not easy for him for using her. And
that was a nice scene, actually. I will give that scene a really good credit there. I think that was really well played.
Yep. And Carolyn is hurt, doesn't want to talk to him at first, and then the two of them work it out. And I think it was, and it shows you that Burke has grown. I mean, now, as I said before, he was only out for himself. Now he's out. He's appointed himself the White Knight of the Collins women. Nobody asked him to do it, but this scene with Carolyn is part of it.
Hmm. So I guess that brings us to the end of 201 to 219 Dark Shadows.
We got rather winded, didn't we?
Oh my God.
And our next Dark Shadows episodes, we'll be covering episodes 220 to 243. Next week, we'll be doing Edgar Allan Poe, Black Cat, and the 1934 film classic Black Cat, starring Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. Though I will sit there and say that Black Cat, the movie, and the Black Cat, the book, are only shared the name, basically, but we'll get into that more in our next episode. You, of course, remember that we are holding a competition, and you can send all your pictures of your pets at info@llpodcast.com. We want to say a big hello to Dee, who is the winner of this month, who won herself a hoodie, a Literary License Podcast
Congratulations,
Dee! Which is in the post to her at the moment. It got posted off today. And we want to thank Teesprings for doing all our t-shirts for us. And thank you very much. And you can find our shop at www.teesprings.com. And you too can buy yourself a Literary License Podcast merchandising. Take it as it will. And of course, you can also make sure that if you want to, we'll have information because we are Rondo nominated podcast. And if you'd like to vote for us, we'll have all those information in our show notes and where you can email. Pretty easy. And you can only do is have to cut and paste, and you can mail it off. Or you may want to click on and see some of the fantastic other people that are also been nominated for various competitions in the Rondos. There's some excellent choices there, and there's a lot of people there that would appreciate your vote. So go out and vote for them.
And actually, I'm going to add that if you can't cut and paste, David Colton, who's the head of the Rondo Awards, will accept an email from you just telling him who you want to nominate. And that's at taraco@aol.com. Taraco@aol.com.
And of course, you can also follow us on our social media, which also includes Facebook, Pinterest, if you're looking for some wacky pictures of all the episodes that we're covering. And you can also find us on Twitter and Tumblr if you are looking for our book reviews and other information about our podcast. And you can also find us on other social
Sure.
media
The internet
platforms.
radio station.
iHeartRadio.
Now, if you're looking for our podcast episodes, of course, you are listening to one of our podcast episodes at the moment, so that's one of your favorites. But if you're ever looking for some alternative ones, you can hear us on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Cashbox Radio. We're also on Spotify, YouTube, of course, and we are also on Podbean, SoundCloud, and various other podcasting podcast platforms, including Cashbox as well. We just joined up with Cashbox, and I believe that a radio station has come in fruition, and we'll let you know that radio station in our next episode after they sign their contracts.
And we're on iHeart. We're on iHeart. I didn't know that.
Yeah, iHeart and TuneIn Radio as well.
Marvelous.
I always say, if we haven't thought of it, somebody let us know, because I'm pretty sure on most of it.
As I said before, our next Dark Shadows will be 220 to 243, which will be talking more about the Barnabas storylines and other storylines in progress for Dark Shadows. But our next episode will be our Edgar Allan Poe, which will be beginning in March, and it will be our 100th episode where we're doing Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat and the 1934 classic, The Black Cat. So it's
If
good night
you're a
for
lucky
myself.
caller, you can get $10,000.
Almost
And
like
Vicky will pay it.
That's kidding.
Yeah.
So good night, Vicky.
Good night, guys.
Good night, Tom.
Good night, everybody.
And we'll see you next week for The Black Cat.
This has been a Literary License Podcast production. If you cry for help, there's no help for you.